let's review some X-Men movies, baby! With Deadpool and Wolverine right around the corner and the trailers showing off some X-Men that we have not seen since the first X-Men movie all the way in the year 2000, it seemed like the perfect time to go back and give you my thoughts on all the previous X-Men movies created by Fox. Because although it's kind of exciting to know that the X-Men are finally home in the MCU and whatever plans they have laid out for the future, the Fox universe did a lot of ups, a lot of downs. But there are a couple of movies throughout this series that I do feel rivals some of the best comic book movies made today. That, along with Deadpool and Wolverine looking like it's a celebration slash funeral of the Fox X-Men characters, let's pay our respects and enjoy what came before. So that's exactly what I'll be doing here for you guys. In this video, I'll be giving you my thoughts on the first three original X-Men movies: X-Men, X2 United, and X-Men The Last Stand. In the next video, I'll be going through the prequel slash new timeline series that was First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and Dark Phoenix. Ending things off with celebrating the man, the myth, the legend himself, looking at the solo Wolverine trilogy with X-Men Origins, The Wolverine, and Logan. Oh, it's gonna be a hootenanny fun time here. Be sure you're subscribed and leaving all your thoughts on them down below. But with all the introductions out of the way, let's just go ahead and hit play on the first X-Men movie that released in the year 2000. So this right here was my introduction into the X-Men universe. I was only 5 years old when this movie came out, and when you're 5 years old, you don't really appreciate the opening of this film. Poland 1944. I must have been in that theater chucking my popcorn, looking at my dad thinking, "You said this was X-Men, not a documentary, Dad." But now as an adult and realizing how messed up it is to open up the film with the tragedy of concentration camps, giving us an insight to the origin of Magneto, this was kind of an unheard of thing for comic book movies. Because this was before Sam Raimi's Spider-Man series. This was way before Iron Man with Kevin Feige, although the man is an associate producer on this film. If anything, you could title this movie X-Men Origins: The Rise of Kevin Feige. And I think that's one of the things that made this series stand out from the beginning and probably led to a lot of other great comic book movies, is just how serious they took the source material and didn't just treat it like people in yellow bright spandex fighting for kid entertainment. It was clear from this opening they were trying to tell real human stories, which is what shines the most when doing an X-Men movie. And I guess right off the top, I do have to state the obvious. It's gonna be so hard not to praise the amazing things done in these first couple of movies without also inadvertently praising Bryan Singer. You can look up what the man did on your own time, but I'm just gonna say Kevin Feige was taking over him Charles Xavier style, mind controlling him from a distance when he still had that perfect head of hair. Probably why he wears the baseball cap now. Man's too powerful. But speaking on the brilliant things this movie does, just setting us in to an already pre-built world. From the get-go, you have Jean Grey, who is currently trying to fight for mutant rights, and Congress is of course pushing back, giving you an idea this has been a growing problem and they're trying to fix that. Then on the other hand, we meet Charles Xavier and Eric Magneto, who also have a pre-built-in history. They have gone from their friends to enemies phase and have this pre-established history that the movie will only tease at through sentences.
What are you doing here? Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Don't give up on them, Eric.
What would you have me do, Charles? I've heard these arguments before.
It was a long time ago. Mankind has evolved since then.
Yes, into us.
And if that wasn't crazy enough of already pre-built-in history, Wolverine in here has a whole entire past he's not aware of that is also just teased in sentences.
What do you see?
Scott.
You know, watching this movie back, understanding the context, how did this movie ever make sense to people who are not comic book fans? Because you gotta admit, in the year 2000, only 10% of the audience going to see this movie was aware of all these backstories. So pretty ballsy of them to just assume They'll get it. They have to get it. We have no time to explain all this complicated history. But looking at some of the main plot points that go on in this movie, one of us brings us to Rogue, who at the height of her puberty starts to get her powers when kissing a boy. Rogue then feeling like a freak and needing to be on the run, realizing she's a mutant, putting her at this weird bar where people are having a brawl for money. And just the huge distinction of one character that I think this movie got absolutely right from the get-go to another one that I'm like, you know, I liked this character as a kid, but now looking back, they did her so dirty. The introduction of Hugh Jackman Wolverine, from the moment he's introduced in that fighting ring, his hairstyle, his body, his demeanor, this guy was just born to play this role. It's so funny that his background was a career in Broadway and he was just chosen to be Wolverine at a time when even comic book fans were pretty picky, not happy at his height, his overall look, thinking, this isn't the guy we needed. I mean, there was people begging for like Danny DeVito to be Wolverine just because he actually matched the height of the character. And I'm like, can you imagine 20 years of Danny DeVito Wolverine? Probably would have been just as epic if I'm being honest. But you know a character is iconic and unique when like his first appearance basically dictates every appearance in media he will ever have. Wolverine being in a bar, having a drink, starting a brawl has literally been part of almost every single iteration of Wolverine. From his video game teases, to his several cameo appearances throughout this series, to even Deadpool and Wolverine showing off a scene of him in a bar. All of this I think deriving back to the introduction that he had in the year 2000. Rogue, on the other hand, I mentioned I liked her character growing up, and I always thought she was done a little dirty, but I'd never realized the extent of how wrong they did Rogue. I don't know what they were attempting here. They sometimes give her this like southern accent that barely peeks through.
I'm sorry. I needed a ride. Thought you might help me.
Well, that's the point, stupid. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an adventure.
I heard the professor was mad at me.
And who told you that?
A boy at school.
But I think her personality is entirely wrong. She doesn't seem very sure of herself. She comes off very shy, very awkward. And a big trait of hers is that she is proud to be immune. And although she was dealt such a bad hand with her powers not being able to physically touch people, she overcomes and wears it as a badge of honor. Now, I'm all up for different iterations, and you can so tell this is a different one. And maybe it's just a more realistic approach if you're a teenager and as a teenager, all you want to do is touch other people's bodies. I could see how it sucks, but I think her arc in these next three movies just doesn't go the way I would have liked. It also even shocks me that Rogue and Wolverine are this close. It's almost how like Clint Barton and Scarlet Witch were once very close to each other, but now you don't even think of them as being friends so later into the MCU, just like I don't really think about Wolverine and Rogue being all that close all these movies later. And I guess on that note, speaking on the characteristics of some of these mutants, let's go on to the other one. So Rogue decides to hitch along with Wolverine to wherever he goes just because it seems like someone that would protect her, until they're stopped by Sabretooth. Oh, dude, you just did an awesome job introducing Wolverine into this world. I can't wait to see the start of the ultimate feud between Wolverine and Sabretooth. Oh, they're already done. Well, Cyclops is here now, my favorite mutant boy. He's gonna be the best thing about this trilogy, right? Right? Oh, man. Okay, winding back to Sabretooth, kind of anticlimactic start there. But even then, you kind of knew Wolverine and Sabretooth were supposed to be yin and yang, the Batman and Joker of one another, always clashing heads. And I think Sabretooth, at the end of the day, although was given an interesting design with some very bushy brows, was one of those mutants that just didn't get translated all that well. He ends up just becoming a big meat sack, the muscle for Magneto. And like, I think the scene that perfectly sums him up is when Magneto later on in the movie needs him to grab the senator, which they have held hostage, and well, this happens. getting back to Storm and Cyclops in here, I think Storm is given a solid job all throughout. While she isn't given much like character development, the small moments you do get of her talking about how she feels about humankind and being scared of them, to other moments with her powers in use, I think they did about as much as they could with her, although I would have liked a little bit more of her, because sometimes it does feel like she was wasted, like in some of the big battles when she just doesn't do much and lets herself get beat up by Toad. But Cyclops, on the other hand, above Rogue in characters that were done dirty all throughout this series. Like, this man is supposed to eventually be the leader of the X-Men. He's the Boy Scout, the good guy, and James Marsden, I think, had the perfect look for him. You know how badly I wanted those red Oakleys on his face? In fact, watching this movie, I went on eBay to see if I could find him. Pretty expensive, but dang, was he a badass looking dude. I learned watching back this trilogy, you just gotta cherish the little moments you get of Cyclops doing just anything on screen, whether it's using his powers or having his personality shine. This is supposed to eventually be the leader of the X-Men. He's an honorable guy. They do a good job of setting up the little banter between him and Wolverine. Although I kind of hate the love triangle that is set up in this movie. I don't think it's needed at all, and I find it kind of weird how instantly attracted Wolverine is to Jean. She's a beautiful girl and all, but I think it's because of this love triangle they inadvertently make Cyclops almost like a wimp or a whiny brat going, "Stay away from my girl, Wolverine." But I think I at least have to be happy they at least got some sort of limelight throughout the trilogy, because once Wolverine is brought into the school, is trying to figure out what's happening, is learning these people are giving themselves superhero names. Still the funniest joke, Wolverine calling Xavier Wheels.
What do they call you? Wheels?
There's a few iconic mutants that only get small cameos. I mean, Kitty Pryde does get seen walking through a wall. You only recognize Jubilee through her yellow jacket. So not everybody gets at least a chance to be ruined. Although, I do like Bobby. Iceman, second favorite mutant of all the X-Men. So with those kind of main players out of the way, the essential plot of what we have going on here is Magneto has found a way to build a machine that'll create this energy force to unlock the mutant gene within regular people, turning everyone into mutants. I had actually forgotten that was the main plot point of this movie. I just remember all the cool X-Men being introduced, but it's handled so well. The storyline that unfolds from the senator who hated mutants, wants to do anything in his power to completely get rid of them, to then being kidnapped by Magneto, gifted powers, and having to seek out the X-Men for help, learning on the other side they're not as bad as they seem, but that mutants are just like any other group, there's good and bad people within them, is such a great plot point, and one of the things that I think catapulted this movie from just being, oh, look at these people with superpowers. But in order for Magneto to get this machine to work, it does drain a lot of his energy, which is actually why he needs Rogue to be able to then cipher off his power and her to be the one to power the machine. And I do kind of hate that the first movie is like one of the only times they ever use Rogue's abilities to its full extent. Because yeah, that turned out to be a great twist when the whole time you're thinking Magneto's after Wolverine and possibly the metal within his body. Rogue's powers turn out to be pretty useful. Like that scene where she goes to wake up Wolverine and then Wolverine freaking stabs her and basically is about to kill her, having Wolverine panic, not know what to do. And then she just absorbs his healing ability and completely heals herself. Why aren't we using more of Rogue's powers throughout this series? That's like the only cool thing she'll do in this entire trilogy, when in the comics, this girl eventually absorbs all of Captain Marvel's powers and has the ability to fly. Not to jump ahead to the other sequels, but she rarely ever takes the power from another one of her fellow mutants and uses it to her advantage. It's always just to oh, I can't kiss this boy and get in his pants. Woe is me. Yo, but she does get the white hair streak, so points, Kevin Fagoli. But even complaining about Rogue, they still get so many other mutant powers down right. I mean, towards the end of the movie where Magneto's finally trying to capture Rogue, he has a whole scene where he goes off against the police, and you just see the OP power of both Magneto and Xavier in this moment. Because Magneto's able to turn all the guns against the police, put their cars in the air, slam them down. After all the amazing sequences we get, a scene like that from Magneto still lets you know how powerful he freaking is. And also, did you know that the helmet being able to block off Xavier's powers and not being able to get mind controlled by him was something invented only in the movies? That's another big lasting impact, because I bet if I check the comics or all this stuff now, that's just like a standard thing with Magneto. That helmet be protecting him. And that was something just invented for the films. Kind of cool. But then making fun of not wearing yellow spandex.
You actually go outside in these things?
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Not cool, buddy. I wouldn't look this good in black leather, I'll tell you that. Bringing us to the final moments of this movie, taking place at the Statue of Liberty, where Spider-Man cameos in.
Wait! See you, chump.
That might have been a joke right now, but with Kevin Feige making Secret Wars, you know he's gonna tie that blooper into making sense and CGI Tom Holland in. But in these final sequences, you do get a couple of cool moments between the heroes and the foes, specifically Wolverine versus Mystique with some red light. Oh, Mystique, Wolverine, keep fighting, baby. And there are some fun moments to be had in this final act. Toad gets to shine and gives Jean the good old Huck 2 spit on that thing. Storm gets a couple of good hits in and nails Toad with the all-time greatest line ever delivered.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else.
Brilliant writing. Brilliant. And in these final moments, they still nail why Magneto is just an awesome villain that you can't get rid of in the first movie. Just the plan he devises to put each X-Men out of commission by not allowing Storm to use her powers because they're trapped in a copper container. Everybody would get electrocuted, making Cyclops face his love and take off his visor. And even back at home with putting Charles Xavier out of commission. Unfortunately, that would be a continuous trend for every time Xavier's in this movies. You just gotta put him out of commission early on. You see how powerful he is by controlling your mind? No, not wheels! We need wheels in the X-Men! Well, get a wheel around! Wheels! But of course, the X-Men find a way. They save the day. Magneto's imprisoned in a really cool plastic chamber. They tease the coming war, having the movie end with Xavier letting Logan know where to go find out answers to his past, stealing Cyclops' bike, continuing to do that boy dirty, and setting us up for an all-time great sequel. So I really like this first X-Men movie. It set up so many iconic things that are still followed to this day. Got a majority of the iconic mutants right, specifically Wolverine and Magneto. Let us down in some areas, but dude, without this movie, I think a lot of comic book movies that would happen afterwards would not realize how you can do this source material seriously while still having a bit of fun. So yeah, solid, fantastic movie leading to a sequel titled X2 United. This time around, the movie kicks off with an absolutely iconic sequence that holds up with so many other comic book sequences done today. Nightcrawler storming the White House, attempting to take down the president. And this opening scene just perfectly captures what you're supposed to do with a great sequel, introducing new characters, new mutants, not that new mutants, and building on the things that made your last film successful, which is compelling stories. Because of what happens in the opening sequence, the president is more open to listen to a new villain, William Stryker, who has spent his whole life experimenting on mutants and is actually responsible for the experiment done on Wolverine. This one character is the perfect tie-in for the two big plot points of the movie. One, the eradication of mutants on Earth, while at the same time giving us more insight into the backstory of the most popular character from the first movie, Wolverine. Since we last saw him, he went on a journey to try and find out where he comes from, what his past is, and he wasn't able to find Zip, leading him back to the mansion to ask Rogue how she does the dance with no pants.
Boyfriend? So how do you guys...
Well, we're still working on that.
Damn, Wolverine, I know you aggressive, boy, but That's kind of personal to ask somebody. And with this established universe and awesome storyline, there is very little I dislike about X2. It's right up there with being a perfect sequel and one that possibly surpasses the first. Getting on some of the highlights of this movie is, for one, Mystique. I didn't talk much about her in the last film. That's because I felt she most really shines in X2. With Magneto being in prison and out of commission for a majority of this movie, Mystique is put on the path to not only figure out what William Stryker is up to, but how to free him. The scenes of her breaking in and getting onto the computer to figure all that stuff out and then becoming a Latin queen. Oi, basura, yes, Mystique! To the lengths she goes through to try and free Magneto from prison in her human form, who I think does not get enough praise for her role and how little she is shown in that human form. It must honestly suck how many hours it probably takes to get into that blue outfit, so the restraint to not have her in her human form as much as possible, or even this great line she mentions to Nightcrawler about why she doesn't do it.
Then why not stay in disguise all the time? You know, look like everyone else.
Because we shouldn't have to.
Cannot be understated how awesome it is that they kept that up for Mystique, when another actress that'll portray her that is arguably way more famous doesn't do as great of a job, but we'll get there eventually. Another major highlight for me is the entire sequence of Logan being put in charge of the mansion the day they go under attack and is forced to help all the children. This is just such a cool sequence because you have to imagine the school has already prepared for moments like this. While a bunch of other schools, at least when I was growing up, was just doing fire drills. I know kids today now do shooter drills. I hate that. That's absolutely tragic to me, but it's just as tragic that it appears in this universe, Xavier has prepared these kids for this type of attack where a lot of them know where to go for secret doors, secret tunnels, because he feared one day they would come for his children. This is then where we get some other mutants to have just small moments to shine, like Colossus, who I thought was given a really cool look in this movie. Kitty Pryde gets to get away by phasing through the roof, and Bobby at one point creates this ice wall separating Wolverine from William Stryker. Just overall, really awesome sequence that highlights a bunch of other mutants' powers. Randomly also, the X phone Wolverine has throughout the movie. I want it. I need it. Why has that not been done yet? The Bobby and Pyro subplot in here, also a great standout for me. You see them start out as friends when they should obviously be enemies, fire and ice. And there's some subtle small moments where Pyro is like seen staring at photos of Bobby and his family, what he grew up with, feeling obvious envy towards him. So this transition Pyro goes through when attacking the police to then eventually ending up on Magneto's side by the end of the film sets up a really cool feud that gets somewhat of a small payoff in the next movie, but we'll talk about that later. Can also undersell how great of a scene it is when Bobby comes out to his parents that he's a mutant, an obvious allegory if someone were to come out gay to their parents and how they would react. Honestly, a lot to love, so probably a good time to mention some of the things I don't love about this movie. Obviously, the little amount of Cyclops in here. He's given one really cool scene when Charles Xavier and Cyclops go to visit Magneto where yeah, he gets to beam up like 2 guards, but then is quickly taken out of commission for like 50% of the movie. He's just gone. And it doesn't make it better that in that time, they just use it as development for Wolverine and Jean to continue on their love affair. Just not a huge fan of that, especially when Wolverine, you were gifted the golden ticket, man. Mystique, after you stabbed her, wanted that Wolvussy, something I'm gonna have to try when that popcorn bucket comes out, and you rejected it, man. He a better man than me, because I would have folded. No point in lying to y'all. In keeping up with the tradition of having to nerf Xavier because he just showed again at the beginning of this movie how absolutely powerful he is by freezing everyone within like a mile radius, he spends the entirety of the movie in this hypnotic trance with William Stryker's son playing this mind game trying to trick him into eliminating all the mutants on the Earth. But honestly, that's it.
Those are my 2 bugaboos.
The rest of the movie is still really fascinating with Wolverine finally learning where he comes from. We see glimpses of Weapon X and him being turned into this monster. Not to mention how badass that fight scene is between him and what I believe is X-23 of the time before Fox has all these different continuities and variants of mutants, but you just don't even see shots like this in comic book movies anymore. And at least Cyclops does come in later into the movie as a villain and has a bit of a fight with Jean, so he gets to do a little bit something more even as a bad guy. I'm taking those breadcrumbs as a Cyclops fan. Also a big fan of the way Magneto had his own ulterior motive to try and flip the switch on William Stryker's plan of killing all humans as opposed to all mutants. Still giving Magneto a nice looming evil presence over the series, and probably my personal personal favorite, Wolverine coming to terms with his past just being a mystery, getting closure with William Stryker, even if it's a little awkward with him just holding that random mutant kid that gets put in the middle of their beat, choosing the life with the X-Men as opposed to continuing to search who he really was. Bringing us to the end of the movie with the mutants escaping, but unfortunately having to sacrifice Jean Grey, who even at the beginning of the movie was teasing her turn to the dark side.
It's not just a headache, is it? Listen, I wasn't really sure how to say this, but ever since Liberty Island, you've been different.
I really wish I could have felt more sad for Cyclops in this moment, having his girl die on him, but she just spent half the movie flirting with Wolverine, and this goodbye with him looking like he's about to kiss Charles Xavier's bald head really didn't lock it in for me. But oh, dude, at least they're teasing the Dark Phoenix storyline, arguably one of the most iconic from the comics. They're gonna do a fantastic job with it, right? Right? Well, even if they do it bad, they'd only do it once, right? Right? Let's get into X-Men The Last Stand. X-Men The Last Stand. Thus far in the series, we did not have a bad film. X-Men 1 was great. X2 was fantastic. All you need to do now is nail the landing. We've built up these past two movies hinting there's a war coming, Charles. There's a war. And the war is supposed to finally have arrived in this third movie. It's not as big of a war as you would expect since it takes place on an island, but they're gonna make do with what they got. They're introducing new mutants, Beast, Angel. They recast Kitty Pryde. Oh, dude, I can't imagine how pissed the actress from the past two movies was when she found out I'm not coming back. And look, even at the time, watching it as a kid way back then, extremely disappointed with this movie. This is the first bad X-Men movie that we would get in a line of other bad X-Men movies. Still some great ones though, but I have new perspective now rewatching this movie and having gone through all these years of even more comic book movies, from Sony Spider-Man movies to MCU movies to DC movies. The bar for bad comic book movies is much lower than the bar for bad comic book movies was back in 2006 when this X-Men movie came out. It's still not one of the best of the series, but in comparison to Madam Web, Morbius, or something like DC's Green Lantern, this is not really a bad movie. It's just underwhelming for what could have been the finale to a great trilogy. But the movie kicks off with a flashback to 20 years ago where we get our first look at some digital de-aging done in a big motion picture. Now, using CG to de-age an actor is like a super common thing. I mean, we got a whole fight sequence with Indiana Jones in his last movie. And for the most part, I do think it was subtle and good enough, although you could still clearly tell these faces are off or look almost like walking wax figures. I mean, Patrick Stewart especially looks like something that Dr. Loomis would describe when staring at those big black eyes.
Behind these eyes, one finds only blackness.
These are the eyes of a psychopath.
The purpose of this scene was to show a time of when Xavier and Magneto were still friends, gathering up students for his school, meeting Jean Grey for the first time, and the abilities she's got. Hey, look, it's Stan Lee! Oh, but I miss his cameos. That's one thing for sure during the rewatch of these movies. I love me a good Stan Lee cameo. Miss you, Stan. Transitioning us to one more opening scene of a little kid trying to cut off his mutant wings. Honestly, I feel like this scene is a much more effective opening scene as opposed to the Jean Grey one. While I know the Jean Grey one is to set up her ultimately villain role in this film, it was really unsettling and sad what Angel was doing to himself in trying not to appear as a mutant and looking ashamed in front of his father. Just a really sad scene that has so many deeper layers and meanings to it that the X-Men is just great at doing. Having us go through the awesome title card sequence, leading us to the X-Men fully in the middle of a training simulation. Obviously, the first time watching this movie, you're thinking, oh, dude, this is awesome. This is crazy. You're seeing the X-Men working with one another, fighting off a big threat, what is, I think, supposed to be a Sentinel, with Wolverine not taking it seriously at all, trying to smoke a cigar, and us kind of understanding why when we see they're in the danger room. And you know what? This entire opening scene of us thinking we're getting something awesome, only to be revealed it's a mirage, a fake, a hologram, really captures my overall feelings of X-Men 3. We catch up with some things that the X-Men have been going going through since the past movie, and of course, Cyclops is grieving. He's still pretty sad, upset, not being part of the team, to where Charles no longer wants to pass on the mantle of the house to him, but instead give it to Storm. Dude, as a Cyclops fan, those words were sad to hear. Even Xavier in the movies has lost faith in the Cyclops she gave us. What the hell? Bobby and Rogue really off with each other, her becoming increasingly more jealous of Bobby being friendly towards Kitty Pryde. Another love triangle, exactly what this series needed. No, I don't like it. With Magneto slowly trying to round up a group of mutants to be part of his army for this war. And look, honestly, I don't even know where to begin, because I think I have equally as bad things as good things to say about this movie. So I guess let's just get into some bad so we end on a good note. Starting off with Cyclops, man. Just play the scene. Play the moment. You kill freaking Cyclops in the opening of this movie? Why? I really would like to have a word with the creative team behind this film and why they thought Cyclops was just a useless nobody character to just be gone for 80% of the last movie and just be killed off in the beginning of this one. I've heard rumors and I've read some interviews where they say that James Marsden was cast in the new Superman movie at the time, Superman Returns, with Brandon Routh, and Bryan Singer was the director of that. And so apparently he was just ready to jump to another franchise and be part of that. But even in that franchise, you were playing the wimpy boyfriend that was getting cheated on behind his back. At least Sonic the Hedgehog will save your career one day, buddy. But it wasn't even just Cyclops dying in the opening of this movie. It's the way Jean Grey gets resurrected, just reappearing before his eyes after he shoots a laser beam down on the ground. What if he never did that? Would then she have come up? Or like, is it also Cyclops' fault for the villain of this movie? So not only you kill him, he's the reason we have a villain too? Just didn't love that. It gave me vibes of Poe in Rise of Skywalker with
somehow Palpatine returned.
Continuing on with the negatives, I feel some characterizations of big characters really started to fall apart in this third movie. Starting off with Magneto, obviously Ian McKellen is still killing it in the role. But one thing I always found fascinating about Magneto and thought they did really well in the first two movies is not really making him a villain. He's just obviously somebody who had a past and seen the evils humankind is capable of, so when he's in a marginalized group like mutants, he fights for them and thinks they should be the next evolution of humankind. Great, perfect, understandable. Here, after everything Mystique has done for Magneto and how loyal she has been to him, the moment she gets hit with the cure that erases her powers, Magneto then completely abandons her and says,
"You're not one of us anymore."
I don't know why that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I know some people would argue, no, that's just how deeply he believes in his morals. And you know what? That would have worked for me if not later in the movie when this big war is happening and he's then just willing to sacrifice other mutants just because they don't have as strong as powers as he does. Making it seem then like he doesn't really care about other mutants when he's willing to just let them be sacrificed as cannon fodder and just more cares about powerful people. I don't know. That kind of stuff rubbed me the wrong way. I know maybe it doesn't bug some people. You know, that's funny to say because even Xavier through the course of these last two movies has been revealed to be a more morally complex character. Because in the last film, it was revealed he knew all along that Wolverine was part of Weapon X and he just withheld that information thinking it was best for Wolverine to find that out himself. He decided not to further help out another student, the son of William Stryker, just because he had no idea how to help him and then just ultimately not really even dealing with him. So then in this movie, you find out that Charles put up these mental wall blocks inside of a child, Jean Grey, because he felt her powers were too unstable and that he could control her. Being one of the motivating factors of why Jean Grey, when she turns into Dark Phoenix, is really upset with Charles to the point that she kills him in a really sad scene. So honestly, the death of Charles Xavier didn't make me mad in this movie. It's one of the many deaths that happen in this film, but I felt like that scene was actually done really well. Actually feels a little bit sad. I even like how Magneto was also not wanting Charles to die, with him begging Jean to stop it, even if he teams up with her later on in this movie. Just, I've always liked that complex relationship between Magneto and Xavier. So honestly, Xavier's death isn't even one of the negatives I have in this movie. I actually thought that was handled nicely and had a long time coming with the way they were building Xavier to have, you know, the moral high ground, but he wasn't always doing things the best way. And the other big negative I have for this movie that I think also really holds it back is just Jean Grey herself as Dark Phoenix. I thought they did a good job setting up her transition movie to where she eventually is now, but now that this is what you led up to and this is kind of the catalyst for the big big war, she ends up just feeling like a side character or a pawn to Magneto's overall plot. I still love Magneto having an involvement in all these movies and kind of being the leader of this war since he's the one teasing it, but with Jean Grey as powerful as she is and with as much stuff as she can do, she feels so underutilized and just not as threatening as she could be, especially when she just seems like a lackey to Magneto's plan. So honestly, that entire aspect of the movie just really lacked for me. Another small negative I have is, I guess, the overall arc for Rogue. So she's been an important character since the first movie, and now we've come to the point where they've created this cure. That's kind of the biggest plot point of X-Men The Last Stand. A mutant arises that whenever you get close to this mutant, you lose your mutant power. So of course the government weaponizes this and creates a serum that will cure anybody from their mutant abilities, and one of the people that's been struggling with them the most is Rogue. And I feel like this entire arc she's been through, to where she just wants to get rid of her powers and is all mainly for a boy, which, you know, not putting much blame on her. I've done a lot of stupid things for a girl myself, but I feel really doesn't give her much of an arc all three of these movies. I don't know why. As a kid, I remember Rogue choosing not to get the cure put in her because she has finally embraced her mutant side and realizes it's a gift, not a curse, and she could learn to live with it. So then when I'm rewatching this movie, and I'm like, oh wait, she does get the cure? And that's her whole arc in this movie is, I don't like being a mutant. I'm not a mutant. Done. I don't know. I felt just completely goes against the Charles Xavier School way and what they were teaching in there, in one, not only learning about your power, but learning to live with it and embrace it. And I think it's just so hilarious. I literally had this mental image that she chose not to get the serum. So that's how much this movie traumatized me. I created my own little story plot point in my head. So with those being my biggest things, let me though at least get into the things I love, or at least a little mixed on to positive. Mixed to positive on Angel. I think it's great you're still introducing new mutants in here, but Angel was given not much to do other than that unsettling opening and then just saving his father at the end. I felt so bad for him when in this movie he goes to the school being like, hey, I finally learned to live and be proud of myself. You guys are gonna accept me in, right? School's closed. What the heck, man? But his involvement was still cool and looks really badass. Beast, of course, is probably the biggest standout new character of the movie. I think it's always interesting when they like let go of mutants from the other films, but then talk about some mutants that have been around this whole time, we just didn't see them. Which, speaking of which, where the heck did Nightcrawler go? Is he back at the circus? Can you give us an explanation? But Kelsey Grammer as Beast, I think, is just iconic in the role. The practical effects makeup is done so well. And plus the fight scenes he gets later in the movie and bragging about sometimes you just gotta, oh, screw it, you gotta fight, man, I thought was really good. Taking away the Jean Grey stuff, the majority of the finale of this movie I thought was awesome. Freaking Magneto taking a bridge and putting it on the island, starting off the war. So many awesome moments. I mean, freaking Wolverine hitting a guy in the nads. Grows those back. Juggernaut versus Kitty Pryde and his most iconic line ever.
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
I want an entire edit of this movie where anytime someone talks to Juggernaut, that's just his response no matter what. Do a little bit of that now, Reed.
Go inside, get the boy, and kill him. I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
What do they call you? Wheels?
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door!
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
But the biggest highlight for me, and although this series ruined my favorite X-Men, Cyclops, my second favorite, finally gets an awesome moment to shine. We get the payoff between Pyro and Iceman coming face to face, once friends, now enemies, fire and ice. This fight should have been longer, but I still absolutely love what went down. Iceman turning full ice, beating Pyro and telling him, you should have stayed in school.
You never should have left.
I cannot tell you how much I love that scene, how epic I think that is. It shows you that there is progress made in being part of the Xavier School. He didn't know how to do that in the beginning, and now after all these years, learning about his powers, being educated, he can do something that awesome. Can you imagine Pyro having to stayed in the school and learning an ability like that? That would have been nice for him. That's not something he learned with Magneto. And that's why I also am like, Rogue, what have you learned this whole time in the Xavier save your school other than just, I want to get rid of this stuff. Having the movie end with Logan being the only one to go up against Jean Grey, what an epic battle for the huge big villain of the last movie, just slowly walking up to her, re-healing and stabbing her. Maybe this would have been more impactful to me if I ever bought into the love relationship between Jean and Wolverine, but I really just didn't. It was honestly something I hated in these movies, so I was just happy to see him do that to her and get rid of this storyline. Cool effects though on Wolverine dying and healing at the same time. Having 3 lives now lost, their graveyards in the school, Storm now looking to be the head of the school, Logan staying behind, looking off into the sunset, with us then zooming in on Magneto trying to use his abilities and cutting as soon as it looks like he hasn't lost him. Like I said, not a great movie. Most likely the first bad movie in the X-Men franchise, but still a lot of solid stuff in there. I still really cherish this trilogy and think it was a great start for these characters and helped introduce them to a lot of people, myself included. While I wish other characters got more of the limelight or a little bit more faithful to their comic book counterparts, the characters that did get to shine, that did get the limelight, I thought made these moments really stand out. And you know, with one of the wonderful things about Fox, them not caring about continuity and what characters have already shown up and who's dead, who's alive, the new timeline they'll begin to set up gives them a second chance at some characters that were possibly done dirty in the past. Stick around for the review of the movies from First Class all the way to Dark Phoenix. Let me know what you guys thought about these films, your favorite moments, your least favorite moments, which do you like, which do you hate? Love to hear it all down below. And can you guess what'll be my costume for the next movie? I'd like to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.